Greetings, my graveling ghouls. Figured I'd just upload a very quick Levia Blitz deck profile. Want to keep this quick, much like the format of Blitz that we all know and love. So don't expect anything too in-depth, but I did get a lot of requests for this video because Blitz is more accessible and a lot of people aren't quite sure on which heroes they like enough to jump into for the classic constructed format. Totally get it. Blitz is a great way to test the waters with a new hero, and Levia in particular is one that is quite tricky to master. So I think with this Blitz build, you can get a feel for at least one of the ways to play her, which I love being the Claws, very aggressive playstyle. That is pretty suitable for Blitz because the games are very high pressure that tend to be over quickly, and Levia has a couple tools that make her decent in Blitz. Although I personally still don't enjoy her too much just for the fact that when you do ever take a blood debt trickle of damage, it is double the percentage of your life pool that it would be in Classic Constructed. But that said, she still is quite fun. Please, guys, give this deck list a try in your local armory events and let me know how it goes. From what we see on the screen here, this is a Mandible Claw build, like I mentioned. Mandible Claws is really great because if you've discarded a card, then it has Go Again, which allows you a lot of wide pressure turns with Levia, especially with cards like Pulping and Blood Rush Bellows. So they're the only weapons I run. All you really need. They're aggressive. Even in like the Wizard matchup, they are going to do a lot of work. So no reason to really change those. The most standard equipment set is Arcanite Skullcap because it is 3 extra health, but you definitely don't need it. In fact, I do also run the Ebb and Fold, and the Ebb and Fold is arguably better in Blitz just because if you ever would take Blood Debt, you can preemptively use your Ebb and Fold to make sure you don't. So if you don't have Skullcap, Ebb and Fold just as good, and I always take it anyway in some of the longer games like versus Guardian. Carrying Husk, really, really, really good in Blitz because it's an extra 6 health, which is perfect for blocking out something like Command and Conquer, which would otherwise wreck your day. I do recommend that you pick this up as your first legendary if you're trying to build Levia. It should also be lowering in price soon because Chain did get a little bit hurt with those recent bans, actually a lot hurt with those recent bans. So Carrion Husk should be lowering in price. So that's good for all us Levia players for sure. Scabskins is an extra 3 health, and then it also has an amazing action that you do roll for quite a bit. You really are ideally looking to roll this in Blitz more often than I'm comfortable with, but you do kind of have to do it because you want to put on that incredible amount of pressure. You do have Gambler's Gloves to protect you from rolling a 1 and just like self-killing on Blood Debt or something. But once you do break Gambler's Gloves, you don't want to be rolling Scabsons again. It's just too greedy. This is the main core of equipment I take every time. But versus Wizard, you do have to have a different plan. So that's Hooves of the Shadow Beast because it's just a guaranteed action point that doesn't require Gambler's Gloves or rolling dice. And then Arcane Barrier 3, you get 2 from Skullhorn, 1 from Nullrune Gloves, and then Barkbone Strapping because as an instant you can gain some resources, which is really great for blocking out Wizard without having to use cards in hand. So that's really the only time I would take these. Otherwise, it's these 5 equipment. So with that, let's check out the deck list. So in Levia, she has a bunch of core cards that I want to touch on first. I think most notably it's in her yellows. She has this card Art of War, which once again I'm hoping to see decline in price because of the nerfs that Chain got. He was one of the abusers of this card. Katsu can use it and we can use it quite well. If anything, it's really an enabler for a lot of the pressure cards that we want to play. So pretty much you can banish an attack card from your hand if you do draw 2 cards. That's perfect for Levia because you get to turn off your Blood Debt by banishing a 6 power. You draw 2 cards and it enables these beautiful cards like Graveling Growl, reds and yellows. Graveling Growl you can only play if you've banished a 6. So Art of War lets you banish a 6, turn on the ability to play Graveling Growls, and then you can even choose Go Again with Art of War as well to be able to just link these Graveling Growl turns into something really heavy pressure-wise for your opponent. So most of the time you are choosing Go Again with Art of War. You're definitely choosing the Banished Draw too, but sometimes you do choose the +1/+1. It's very hand dependent, but it is a very good card for Levia. Then Bloodrush Bellows. It's the main reason you're running Mandible Claws. It's amazing in Levia. It's amazing just being able to claws into like a one cost. So if you pitch a blue for Bloodrush, that's 2 left over to swing claws. Then you pitch another blue, swing claws again, and then 1 left over can go to something like Boneyard Marauder for an extra 8, capping off your Bloodrush turn. That's amazing. But if you can go even wider, wow, this card gets nuts. Because you can swing 10 with claws and then maybe end with swinging 11 with Endless Maw, 21 damage. Or if you could even link it into like a Dread Screamer Graveling Growl turn, my gosh, we're looking at a base 6 that then goes to 8, a base 7 that then goes to 9. It's pretty ridiculous. Then we've got Beast Within, which is a very good card for Levia, because if it's discarded, it's going to turn off your Blood Debt and draw you a card. So really, this card, if you can get it off with Bloodrush Bellows or Pulping, it's doing everything you want, because now you don't have to worry about turning off Blood Debt with another card that would normally banish 3 from graveyard or something like that. It doesn't come up all the time, but you know, worst case, it's just like a 3 pitch, or sorry, a 3 block yellow pitch. It's just a decent card for Levia, and when you get it off, it does feel very, very good. Then for some other filler yellows, we've got Graveling Growl, which is a very good card to play. Very good card to pitch as well, just because you know this is one that as you go in that second cycle of your deck, if the game even goes that long, this is a card you're very happy to see. This card is one of the weaker ones, but it's just a yellow pitch, 6 power that will turn off Blood Debt if need be. But this one, for the most part, you're just going to be blocking with. Then for the reds in the deck, we've got the core Blood Debts on the left. We've got Boneyard Marauder, which is an amazing card. It only costs 1, so really this is insurance against drawing all reds. I love to have this in Arsenal because when you draw all reds, which is probably going to happen, you know, once out every 3 games or so, whatever it is, a lot of times you would normally just lose those games. But with Boneyard Marauder, you're safe on those all red hands to just block with 3, pitch 1 to still swing 6 Boneyard Marauder, turn off Blood Debt. It's amazing. It's also really good in Arsenal because of the Bloodrush Bellows. If you can cap off your turn with the Boneyard Marauder, you've swung 18. So very good card there. Dread Screamer, another amazing card. Go Again in this deck is devastating because a lot of your stuff is statted just a little bit above the power curve for the detriment of having Blood Debt on the card. So Dread Screamer just enables these really big pressure turns that your opponent will definitely feel. One of the best combos being Dread Screamer into Graveling Growl. Dread Screamer costing 2, you can pitch a blue, banish 3 if it gains Go Again, which of course you're hoping for. Then lets you swing Graveling Growl for 13 damage off of a 3-card hand, which is fantastic. So Graveling Growl, already talked about that. This is an amazing card on your Art of War turns, on your Dread Screamer turns, or when you have extra actions with Scab Skins. So really good card. I try not to block with this one. I almost always want to play it because that value you get from playing it, the pressure is just immense. But you know, the good thing about a lot of these cards is that you don't mind blocking with them because they do block 3. In the graveyard, they're going to count towards banishing 6 powers that turn off your Blood Debt. So really, the hands end up being a lot more dynamic than you'd think. Endless Maw is another amazing card because on a 2-card hand you can pitch a blue, swing 9, which your opponent would then have to commit 3 cards to blocking fully, even though it really only cost you 2. So really, really good card here. The pressure that this card puts on is great, especially because you've also hopefully countered the pressure pretty well by being able to block 2 pretty handily, maybe 3 if this card was in Arsenal, and the last card in your hand is a blue. Ghostly Visit, another really good card because it blocks 3 and then is playable from banish, so when you do banish this card with all your banish 3s, once it's in your banish zone, if you have an extra action point, Go Again, whatever, you can just play this in, swing for 4, refills your graveyard, and it's just quite good. It's not going to gain the +2 on Blood Rush, but seriously, when you roll these Scab Skins and end up with an action point you weren't expecting or something like that, Ghostly is amazing. Can also go really well with a Dread Screamer. Pitch a blue into the Ghostly, that's 10 damage as well. Writhing Beasthulk is really good in Blitz because it has Dominate. Dominate is really terrifying for your opponent in Blitz because you can just start to steal games as the game goes later. So that's really all this is there for. It's a late game card, so if it's in your hand early, just go ahead, block with it. It's no big deal. Nourishing Emptiness is kind of that same reason. Dominate is so good every time you can squeeze it in. So Nourishing, if you can play it on the early turns, of course it's amazing to get the +1 intellect. You also can play it in later turns with Levia, and in Blitz it actually does come up more often than you'd think compared to Classic Constructed, because in Classic Constructed the games are going to go longer, you probably are getting to the point with your graveyard where Nourishing is really never going to be live. But with Blitz, you have the opportunity to kind of keep the pressure on and have this live every time you see it, which is quite nice. Worst case, it still blocks 3. Pulping, another amazing card for Levia. It doesn't block, but early game this can put on a ton of pressure, and late game it still has Dominate. So when it's defended by less than 2 cards, it has Go again, which basically makes it like a mini Command and Conquer for your deck because your opponent has to choose to block it. Of course, they don't get the choice if it has the Dominate, which is great because then you can go off with Go again into potentially Claws because they'll be active now since you discarded a 6, and on and on. So Pulping is a great enabler. I love putting this card in Arsenal. It doesn't block anyway, so you're really losing nothing by putting it there. And then for your blues, you've got the core blood deck cards here. Just by the way, all these cards are in stacks of 2, except for the 2 blues here. Soul Harvest and Doomsday are legendaries, so they're one-ofs. Soul Harvest is really in the deck just because it's a 3-block blue pitch 6. You rarely ever are going to want to play this because it's very card intensive to do so, both from graveyard and in terms of the pitch cost. But the fact that it does pitch blue, block 6 or block 3 and have 6 attack is just checking every other box you want. So it is a good card. And then Doomsday, you barely are going to get the chance to play this card in Blitz because once you have 6 cards in Blood Debt or 6 cards with Blood Debt in your banish zone, you're in very risky territory of just self-killing yourself anyway. But if you do find the Doomsday at that perfect opportune time, then the fact that Plasmafet lets you just safely turn off Blood Debt every turn by, as an additional cost, banishing a card from hand. That's just fantastic and can seal victories in ways that you wouldn't have expected because now you get to block 3 cards in hand, just keep the 1 to banish with the Plasmafet swing, and you're safe on Blood Debt. Your opponent will then have to choose at some point to kill your Plasmafet, which protects your own life and then lets you swing back with a big hand. So it does come up. But if you don't see this card at the right time, it is really one of the worst cards in the deck because it doesn't block. And then if you see it really early and you have to pitch it, you're basically never seeing it again anyway, and it's way too greedy to Arsenal. Then for the other blues, we've got Boneyard Marauder. So you'll notice here that this is when things start to get tricky because this is not a 6 power and doesn't really have too many innate synergies. But what it does do is count towards Blood Debt if it's been banished to at least try to get Doomsday off. It also is a 1 cost to banish 3, which can turn off Blood Debt. And on top of that, it being the 1 cost and a brute attack means you can play it to cap off your Blood Rush turns and still swing 6 after 2 claw swings, which is 16. Still pretty threatening, but by no means would I ever want to keep this in Arsenal. For the most part, if this is in hand, I'm blocking with it, or if I need the blue, it's going to pitch. Deadwood Rumbler is a great card to actually play early game because it's going to fill up your graveyard by drawing and discarding. And yes, it doesn't block, but this is really, when you start to see, okay, I'm going to hold a blue anyway to make my plays, it tends to be these non-blocks. So you've got the Deadwood Rumbler for that. You don't really want to play this anytime later than that first turn or so, because it is not efficient. Pitching 3 for just a 6 no-hit effect, not great, and the fact that it only banishes a card due to a random effect is also not reliable enough to turn off your Blood Debt. So really it's just in here for the pitch and the fact that it still is a 6 power if this ends up in your graveyard. Blue Dread Screamer is pretty good though, because it does hit that magic number of 4, which late game is still a great breakpoint to threaten your opponent because most cards are only going to block for 3. So this can kick off your wider turns, even though this is only swinging for a 4. What you come in with afterwards can be something like another Graveling Growl. So this card's pretty much good at all points in the game, just like the red counterpart, but I wouldn't go out of my way to arsenal it. Wrecker Romp is an amazing card for Brute. 6 power, 3 block, blue pitch, and for Levia it does something a little bit extra, which is fill the graveyard if you play this early, because as an additional cost, you're going to discard a card. So going first, for example, just go ahead, play Wrecker Romp, start to fill your graveyard with some good stuff, and you're just happy to do so early. And then we've got some cheeky blues at the end here. I absolutely love these as a pair. We've got Convulsions from the Bellows of Hell. So what this card can do is once again give you another way to access Dominate, and it can do so in one of the strongest ways for your deck. You can pitch a blue to play Convulsions from the Bellows of Hell, which then banishes a 6, gives the next power attack Dominate and +1, and that lets you play Graveling Growl. So from a 3-card hand, you can pitch a blue into Convulsions into a Graveling Growl, which if it's the red one is going to come in for 8 with Dominate, which is just fantastic. You also don't really hate blocking with this card because it's still a block 3 and is pretty good against like Bolton. They won't gain the plus. It's just an absolute great card. I'd take this every time over something like Unworldly Bellow, but if you want extra blues, Unworldly Bellow is probably the next best choice of the blues that are missing from this lineup. Then we've got Reckless Swing. So Reckless Swing, really cheeky card. I love it early game, like going second. If your opponent swings in, you can Reckless Swing, cheese a little damage on them, fill up your graveyard, and then of course late game it's fantastic because it can seal victories for you. One of my favorite plays is to actually arsenal this at some point in the mid game when the pressure's on and you and your opponent are basically playing 4-card hands smacking back against each other. The fact that you have Reckless Swing sitting in your arsenal is just a guaranteed way to know that you have lethal if you get your opponent down to at least 2. So absolutely big fan of this card, and it's going to cheese wins, and your opponent's never going to like it, but they also can't really play around it. So that's it. That's the deck profile. You'll notice that this deck doesn't have Command and Conquers. I don't think they're really needed. They would definitely take the slot over Nourishing Emptiness if you had them, but I'm pretty happy playing Nourishing Emptiness, especially in Blitz. I feel like it gets a lot more value. But then again, so does Command and Conquers. That's up to you to play. You don't need the Doomsday as well if you want to save some money. This can easily go towards any other blue like the Unworldly Bellow that I mentioned, or one of my personal favorites is to slot in Eye of Ophidia, even though that one's even more expensive, but if you pulled it, go for it, or Gorganian Tome because it's going to help cycle through your deck and fill your graveyard. But that's the deck profile, guys, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, anything you'd change, any results that you get from playing this in your local armories. I absolutely find Levia to be a blast, but for me personally, taking this kind of deck to a Blitz event just scares me a little bit too much, so I'll leave that challenge up to y'all. But that's going to be it tonight, so hopefully y'all had a great day, and I'll catch you next time.